There's a moment every fantasy writer hits. You've got a killer idea, you can see the world, smell the magic, but then the question hits, what's the actual story? And everything stalls. Today, I'm going to walk you through how I solve that in my own novels with the same emotional first framework I share in my course and with the writers I coach. In this video, you'll see me outline an entire fantasy novel from scratch. And to start, we need to talk about the story promise. You see, there is a difference between having a story idea and having a story. You can build 1,000 years of lore, design a floating city powered by singing crystals, and still not know what your novel is actually about. And by about, I don't mean the plot. I mean the emotional journey. The thing the reader feels by the end, even if they cannot explain why. It's not what your character does, it's what your story proves. It's the emotional truth your protagonist discovers the hard way, through pressure, through failure, through irreversible choices. And if you skip this step, you'll feel it. Your story will keep drifting, your middle will stall, your climax won't feel earned, because you haven't defined what change your story is really tracking. So instead of asking what happens next, I start with a different question. What is this story promising to explore emotionally, and what will my protagonist discover that they couldn't see at the start? Let me show you how I answer that in a story designed specifically for this video here. This is the raw concept we're working with. A disgraced royal beastkeeper discovers the last phoenix alive, while the empire she once served begins to collapse. There are a dozen different stories that could come from that premise, but I'm choosing one particular emotional path through it, one lens that defines the transformation this book is going to follow. This is a story about learning that loyalty isn't obedience, it's the courage to protect what truly matters, even when it means defying everything you once served. That's our story promise. This single sentence becomes my North Star. It doesn't lock in the plot, but it does tell me which moments matter. And just like that, we're not wandering aimlessly anymore. We have direction. Because now that we know what emotional promise this story is built to keep, we can shape the engine that drives it. And that starts with the logline. The logline condenses everything into a single focused question. When this character is thrown into this situation, what are they trying to do? And what's in the way? If your story promise defines what the story believes, the logline shows how that belief gets tested in action. And when it's done right, the whole story snaps into place. A good logline doesn't just summarize a book though, it forces you to decide. Where does this story begin? What is the character after? And what would it cost them to fail? Let's take the story promise we just defined and boil the whole book down to a single line that carries character, conflict, goal, and pressure. Here's the sentence I use to structure every logline I create. When an inciting incident happens to protagonists, they must goal or else stakes, but obstacle stands in their way. Now, plugging in the emotional spine of our story, it might look like this. When a disgraced beastkeeper discovers the last phoenix alive, she must protect it from the collapsing empire she once served or risk it being turned into the empire's final weapon. But her brother, the crown's most loyal soldier, is hunting her down. This does a few things right away for us here. First, it gives us a moment of ignition. Discovering the phoenix marks the point where everything starts changing. Next, it sets up the protagonist clearly as someone who used to follow orders without question, now disgraced and unsure where she stands. Then it makes the goal simple and focused. Protect the phoenix. Also, it shows the danger if she fails, meaning the phoenix gets captured and turned into a weapon by the very empire she once served. And finally, it gives us a strong obstacle. Her brother, the empire's most loyal soldier. This structure makes it easy to see what kind of story we're building. We've got a goal, a risk, and someone standing in her way. And all of it connects right back to that emotional promise we talked about earlier. The one about what happens when loyalty means choosing who you protect instead of who you serve. Notice how the logline is emotionally charged but still tight? We're not naming the empire or explaining the magic here. That's not the point. The logline isn't about detail, it's about pressure. Every scene that follows is just this sentence made messier and more human. But pressure on its own isn't enough. To keep your story moving, you need more than a central conflict. You need layers. So next, we're going to build the structure that creates all that. And I call it the conflict triangle. You see, plot is basically pressure, but not all pressure comes from the same direction. If your story only has one kind of conflict, it goes flat fast. But when you layer pressure from the outside world, from relationships, and from inside your protagonist's head, that's when the story starts to bend them into someone new. And that's exactly what the conflict triangle does. It gives your plot 3 distinct angles of attack. One that threatens your character's survival or external goal, one that comes from someone they care about, and one that forces them to question who they are or what they believe. When you get this right, even quiet scenes feel loaded. Conversation with a friend can feel as intense as a sword fight because there's emotional weight pressing in from all sides. So how does this look like for our Beastkeeper? First, we have the external conflict. The Empire wants the Phoenix. They're collapsing, they need a symbol of power, and they will burn anything to get it. Next, there's the interpersonal conflict. Her younger brother is the one they sent to hunt her. He believes she's redeemable. He's the one who taught him to ride, trained him, raised him. But now he serves the Empire, and catching her is the only way he thinks he can save her. Finally, we have the internal conflict. She still believes her worth is tied to loyalty, to obedience. Even after exile, even after everything she's seen. That belief is crumbling, yes, but letting go of it would mean letting go of everything that once shaped her identity, the person she thought she was. Each of these creates a different kind of tension. The Empire forces her to run, her brother forces her to feel, and her inner belief forces her to doubt. And all of them tie back to the story promise. What does loyalty actually mean? Now here's the cool part. When you write scenes, you don't need all 3 at once. But when you manage to build scenes that twist 2 or even 3 of these layers together, that's when the story becomes hard to put down. So now that we know what's squeezing her, we can start tracking what that pressure changes. And we do that through emotional waypoints. 5 major moments that reshape how she sees herself and the world around her. The way I see it, stories are shaped by choices. But not every choice deserves a spotlight. The scenes readers remember are the ones where the protagonist changes. Where they hesitate, risk something real, and come out the other side slightly or sometimes massively different. That's what emotional waypoints track, the irreversible shifts in your character's inner world. Instead of plotting what happens, we're going to map what changes. This is how you avoid a soggy middle and make every scene pull its weight. When you know what your character is supposed to wrestle with in each section of the book, you stop writing filler and start building momentum. So how do we do that? Well, we take the pressure from the conflict triangle and we force the character to crack. Here's what defines a real emotional waypoint. First, the stakes are personal. Not just about plot, it has to hit something the character cares about deeply. Then, both options have to cost them. There's no safe path here. Whatever they choose, something important is lost. Also, it has to collide their values. The tension comes from competing beliefs. Loyalty versus justice, safety versus truth, love versus responsibility. From here then, it needs to change their path. The result of the choice must alter what's possible going forward. And lastly, it reveals something true about who they are or who they are becoming, even if they're not ready to see it yet. When you build your story around moments like that, the plot doesn't just move, it means something. So let's walk through the emotional waypoints of our Beastkeepers arc and see how they hold up to this. Waypoint 1, the catalyst. Here our protagonist discovers the Phoenix. But the true turning point isn't the find, it's the decision she makes. She can report it to the Empire and uphold the rules she lived by, or protect it and cross a line she's never dared to before. She chooses to protect it, and that one act makes her a traitor in the eyes of the Empire. Even deeper than that, it shatters her belief that loyalty means obedience. It costs her status, her safety, and the hope of ever being allowed back in. But she doesn't just lose something, she discovers something too. A glimpse of a different kind of loyalty, one rooted in choice, not command. That's what makes this her first true waypoint. She's no longer just surviving, she's starting to transform. Then comes waypoint 2, the challenge. A good second waypoint raises the stakes and tests the belief that just cracked open in the first. Not enough that she made one bold move. Now she has to decide whether she'll keep going when the cost gets higher. In our Beastkeeper story, she sees a village being punished for helping her. Homes burned, families taken. She could stay hidden and the Phoenix would stay safe. But silence here would mean agreeing through inaction that those lives don't matter. So she steps in, not because she knows she'll win, but because she knows she cannot walk away. Waypoint 3 is the crisis, and midpoint moments should force the character to face something they've been avoiding. In this case, it's her brother. He finds her and offers a way out. He says she can still turn herself in, make things right, and come home. For a moment, she wants to believe him. But then he says she has to give up the Phoenix. Now the values collide. Protect her brother and everything they used to be, or protect the Phoenix and everything she's starting to believe. In this moment, she doesn't attack or surrender. Instead, she lets her brother leave, knowing full well that he will return as a threat. It's her choice that costs her the chance to ever fix their relationship, but it's also the moment she fully accepts what side she's on. Which brings us to waypoint 4, the sacrifice. Waypoint 3 showed what she was willing to lose emotionally, this one shows what she'll risk physically. Her brother returns, and this time there's no warning. He attacks right away, loyal to the Empire and convinced she's gone too far. She tries to stop him without killing him. He still doesn't want to fight, but he forces it, pushing her to kill him in order to save the Phoenix. In doing so, she steps into a new version of herself, one who understands that protecting what matters sometimes comes at a personal cost you never wanted to pay. And that brings us to waypoint 5, the transformation. The final waypoint should show your character acting on their new belief, not by reacting to pressure, but by choosing to do something hard when no one expects them to. In this moment, the Empire is closing in again, further enraged by the death of her brother. Facing impossible odds, she reaches the final point of no return. Save herself and lose the Phoenix, or sacrifice herself to ensure the Phoenix can escape. And so she dies, stopping the Empire's advance. Not because she doesn't want to live anymore, but because this is what she believes now. Loyalty isn't about orders, it's about protecting what matters even when it costs you everything. You see, this isn't a tragic ending. Yes, it's sad, and if the novel actually existed, it might even lead to some readers shedding a tear or two. But it's also a clear and final act of character. Her first choices during the early emotional waypoints broke her old belief and showed her transformation, while the last one proves it without a doubt. And all that brings us to a new challenge. How do we turn these turning points into a full working plot? Well, we know what changes, but let me walk you through how to show it. Writers often get stuck because they treat plotting as a list of events. But scenes aren't just stuff that happens. They are pressure in motion, moments that either change the character or build the tension until they must. This is where we need to stop thinking beginning, middle, end, and start tracking emotional momentum. Because when your story is built around emotional change, every scene should either test your character's belief or tip them toward the next big choice. So to move from waypoints to scenes, we connect the emotional dots. We ask, what kind of pressure pushes the character from one decision to the next? That's how we build a scene map, not from plot beats, but from cause and effect that matters to the character. Let me show you exactly what that means. To turn emotional waypoints into scenes, we don't just look for what happens, we look at the emotional function. Each waypoint needs a cluster of scenes that shows pressure building, a meaningful choice being made, and then the fallout that reshapes what's possible. That's why the scene map follows a 3x5 structure, 3 scenes per emotional waypoint. Each cluster includes a setup scene, a choice scene, and an aftermath scene. Here's how that plays out for our Beastkeeper. The first cluster focuses on waypoint 1, the catalyst. In the setup scene, we open inside the Empire. She's a former Beastkeeper stripped of rank, still loyal and still hoping that if she keeps her head down, she might earn her way back. This shows the rules she lives by and the cracks already forming under the surface. In the choice scene, the actual waypoint, she finds the Phoenix, alive, endangered, and deep in Empire territory. If she reports it, she might restore her standing. If she hides it, she becomes a traitor. She chooses to protect it. In the aftermath scene, she flees while the Empire brands her a criminal. But for the first time, she feels clear. She's protecting something real, not just following orders. This cluster is to show the emotional rupture between who she was and what she's starting to believe. The choice here defines the new direction the story must follow. Then comes the second cluster for waypoint 2, the challenge. In this setup scene, she hides in a quiet village. She stays distant, careful not to involve anyone. But slowly she sees what community looks like outside the Empire, people helping her without expecting anything in return. In the choice scene, the Empire discovers the aid she's been given. They retaliate, punishing the village. She could keep hiding, protect herself and the Phoenix, but she steps in openly. In the aftermath scene, the village survives barely, but now the Empire knows she's alive and where she is, so their focus turns to her. Her face spreads on posters and there's no going back to invisibility. This cluster escalates the risk. She's no longer a secret traitor, she's a visible threat. Forces her to own her new identity, not just act from the shadows. The third cluster then is about waypoint 3, the crisis. In its setup scene, word spreads that her brother is sent to find her. Flashbacks reveal how close they were, how much he learned from her, and how much she still wants to believe he might understand. In the choice scene, they reunite. He begs her to surrender and says they can fix this, but only if she gives up the Phoenix. She declines and lets him walk away. In the aftermath scene, the emotional weight lands hard. There's no fixing this anymore, no bridge back to her old life. She's made her side clear and she knows her brother will come back ready to stop her. This cluster makes the interpersonal conflict personal. It's to fracture the last tie to her old life and force her to accept what she's now fighting for. Cluster 4 focuses on Waypoint 4, the sacrifice. Its setup scene includes the brother returning. There are no more words, he's here to end it. In the choice scene, she tries to hold back, to talk him down, but he won't listen. In the end, to protect the Phoenix, she's forced to kill him. In the aftermath scene, it's quiet. She buries him alone, somewhere isolated. This isn't a victory at all. It's a cost she'll carry for the rest of her life. Overall, this cluster isn't about proving strength, it's about showing the irreversible consequence of choosing to protect. It should hurt because that's what makes it matter. Lastly, we have the 5th cluster about Waypoint 5, the transformation. In this setup scene, she learns the Empire has tracked the Phoenix again. They're close and tension is rising. In the choice scene, she has to decide between her own survival and saving the Phoenix, ultimately leading to her dying for the cause. In the aftermath scene, the Phoenix survive, and those who witness her choice begin to question everything, leading to her death becoming a new kind of beginning. This final cluster doesn't just close the arc, it proves it. She doesn't act out of pressure anymore, she chooses freely to protect. That's what earns the emotional ending. Now, these 15 scenes don't cover every detail, but they give you the emotional backbone of the story. The key is that each cluster builds pressure, delivers a meaningful choice, and then shows us what that choice changed. That's what keeps your outline emotionally alive throughout the entire story. We've now got 5 emotional turning points and a roadmap of how the character gets from one to the next. This is your spine. You could write the entire story with just that foundation and still be sure that your story has real emotional depth. But what if you're more of a plotter and want to expand it even further by adding subplots, side characters, or deepening your world? This is where connecting scenes come in. These are the scenes that link one emotional cluster to the next. They don't carry the emotional spotlight, but they shape how the spotlight lands. Think of your core scene map like a constellation. The waypoint clusters are the brightest stars. Connecting scenes draw the lines between them. And when done well, they keep readers emotionally tethered from moment to moment, even when the major beats are still ahead. These aren't just filler. They are where pacing lives, where arcs deepen, and where your story earns the turning points that follow. But to make that happen, each scene still needs a job. In my framework, I use 4 kinds of connecting scenes. Processing scenes let the character and reader absorb the last choice. These often include reflection, dialogue, or quiet fallout, but they still carry emotional weight beyond the aftermath scene. Development scenes show growing trust, evolving beliefs, or small behavioral changes. This is where you sneak in more of the character arc without announcing it to the reader. Build-up scenes then increase tension, foreshadow the cost, and let danger creep closer before the next big choice. And bridging scenes, they deliver world building, explore subplots, or update the external stakes, but always in a way that connects back to your character's emotional arc. Let's look at an example together. After the Beastkeeper lets her brother go in Waypoint 3, we might include a processing scene where she revisits an old memory of training him, a development scene where she starts sharing her plan with an ally for the first time, and a build-up scene where she hears rumors the Empire is closing in. Each of these moves the story forward, but more importantly, they prepare us emotionally for what's coming next. But whether you stick to the core scene map and write freely from there, or plot out the entire novel first, as long as you put in the work to define the true promise and logline of your story, you'll have a thread that's worth following. And if this outline example resonated with you and you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and actually build something you can finish, then you're exactly who I designed my full Plan Your Fantasy Novel in 30 Days course for. In it, I guide you through the entire framework in detail, step by step, and with worksheets and examples along the way. Even more, in every lesson you can ask questions and get personal feedback from me directly. If you've ever said, I know my world, I just don't know the story, this course was built for you. You don't need to figure it out all alone or waste months stuck halfway again. Click the link in the description below to enroll in the course, get full access instantly, and start turning your ideas into a story you not only can finish, but one that's actually worth telling in the first place.